Let's be honest, fantasy is the best genre. Hey guys, I'm Marlene and welcome back to my channel. So fantasy is my speciality. It is the genre I write and the genre I read. So I thought I'd compile a few tips on writing fantasy. This video is going to be very broad. It's going to cover a lot of stuff. So firstly, subgenres. Every subgenre will have their own tropes, their own guidelines and reader expectations. So it is important to know what subgenre you are writing in, because you will have to read books in that genre and do some research to see what makes that genre. I feel like I'm saying the word genre so many times, but you'll have to know what the reader would expect if you write something in that subgenre. So here are some examples. So the first one is epic fantasy, high fantasy, swords and sorcery. This is what most people think of when they think of fantasy. There's a whole different world where magic is integral. Magic is part of how that world works. There are magical species, there are big battles. This is things like Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, Eragon, those fantasy classics. Then you have urban fantasy, which is magical elements in a urban setting, and this is something like Zoo City by Lauren Beekes. Then you have low fantasy, where there's a world where magic is not widely used or maybe even known about, but there are magical elements to the story. So it's not that everyone in the world can do magic or there are magical species or things like that. It's just there are some magical elements woven through a world like our own where magic is not the norm. This will be, for example, the book that I am currently writing, Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, and writing by Robin Hobb or Mark Lawrence. Then there's contemporary fantasy, and this is magic set in the current modern real world, and this is something like Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare, or at least the first few books. And then we have dark fantasy, which is fantasy with dark themes. This will be something like Nevernight by Jay Kristoff or The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. So genres can also combine. There are a lot more subgenres. There are hundreds of subgenres. So try to figure out what exactly you're writing and know what is expected from that genre. It doesn't mean you have to write a specific type of story, but just know that if you classify something as high fantasy, there are certain requirements for that genre. So read in your subgenre. Then number 2 is magic system. The one thing all subgenres of fantasy have in common is magic. That's what makes fantasy fantasy. There's some magical element. So if you're going to create a magic system, here are some questions to keep in mind. What can magic do? What can it not do? Who can use it? What is the cost of using it? Why does magic exist in your world? And what makes it dangerous? There are other questions that you can also ask, but these are some of the questions to kind of get your mind going on creating that magic system. Then something else that might be good to keep in mind is hard magic systems versus soft magic systems. So hard magic systems have clear limitations. This is something like elemental magic. There's clear restrictions on what you can do with magic. You can control the elements. Then you have soft magic, where it's basically magic can do whatever the wielder wants it to do. This is like in Harry Potter. There's not a clear restriction on what magic can do. Now, if you want to go the easy route, hard magic system is a great way to go because it has inherent limitations, which means that you're not going to write yourself into a corner or have a main character that can never be defeated. With soft magic systems, it's important to impose limitations on your specific magic system. Maybe the cost of using magic is very high. Maybe only certain people can do certain things like that. So for hard magic, you have inherent limitations. For soft magic, you're going to have to think of something for your specific book. Then there's world building. If your book is set in a world other than our own, like a lot of fantasy books are, then you're gonna have to do some world building. So here are some of the things that you're gonna have to think about: geography, climate, political structure, religion, names, economic structure, plants and animals, travel, the relative time period that you're going for, and the technology that your world has. Obviously, lots of elements to think about, but these are some of the important ones. You're going to have to know this before you start, and then don't info dump it on the reader. Don't have a whole chapter in which you just explain how the world works. You have to weave these world elements through the story naturally. Then word count. Depending on your age category, fantasy is often the genre where you can write long books. So with adult, I'm talking about adult fiction for the moment, most agents won't accept debuts over 90,000 words. But if you're writing fantasy, that upper limit is 100 to 120,000 words. Now, your chances may still be lowered if you're writing 120,000 words, so I would recommend going between 90,000 and 100,000. That would be the sweet spot for a debut, but once again, that's just what I've heard, what I think, so do the proper research. If you're writing young adult or middle grade, those will have its own standards and you should research them. But it's great to know that with fantasy, you have a little bit of leniency in terms of those upper word count limits. Finally, indulge. Fantasy is a genre for writers who want to indulge their imaginations, to let their imaginations run free. So write all the magical characters, the weird worlds, and the stunning magic that your heart desires. For this genre, don't rein yourself in during the drafting process. You can always remove things in the editing process, but in drafting, it's the time to let your imagination run wild. Let all your weirdness bleed onto that page. So that's it. Those are some of my tips or things to keep in mind when you're writing fantasy. I absolutely adore this genre. If you're writing a fantasy, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked these tips. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and ring that little bell if you want writing advice videos every single Friday and tons of bonus content. As always, you can find me on my website, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter. All the links are listed below, and I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye!